is the broadcast of Back Roads of Illinois. We are bringing latest agricultural news and markets update on Back Roads of Illinois. Bring you like inside of the markets and interview with people in the agricultural industry for farmers and ranchers in central Illinois and across the Midwest. Today is edition of Back Roads of Illinois. We were Central Illinois agriculture source, and in the Midwest alongside in Central Illinois agriculture, we were glad you're here on a Thursday afternoon on the show. Otherwise, we were getting ready for football on Friday night at 23 Illinois and 24 Nebraska on tomorrow night, as well as high school football. We were done to talk about football. Now we were talking about the Mississippi River. It's pretty lower since fall of 2022. We were going to talk about that with Mike Steinhooek from Soy Transportation. Mike are watching it on the Mississippi and the barge situation in the river. We were going to have Lori Stevemer from National Pork Producer Council for updating on the organization for the producers in the pork industry in Washington, D.C. with Congress about the Farm Bill and Trade, Prop 12 in California. We were getting updates on today's program with Lori Stevemer out of National Pork Producer Council. We were talking about the commodities markets with John Heinberg from Total Farm Marketing on this afternoon. Now, this is your agricultural news and markets update on Back Roads of Illinois. The harvest season is underway in the Midwest and Central Illinois, but yield is lower than expected after this summer and the spring in northwest Iowa and southern Minnesota and South Dakota. To the east from those states, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio. There is a good yield in these areas. The University of Illinois Extension will be held for iFarm Winery on October 10th at 11 Central Time. The host will be Todd Gleason from the University of Illinois Extension in Urbana and Champaign. Brazil has been planting in north-central Mato Grosso do Sul, Parna. There are a lot of dryness for this planting season in Brazil and Argentina. Remember, Brazil had a bad weather for the soybean crop in Mato Grosso for last May. There are your agricultural news on Back Roads of Illinois. We were coming back with our guest Mike Steinhooek from Soy Transportation, and we were going to talk about the pork industry with Lori Stevemer from National Pork Producer. Stay tuned on Back Roads of Illinois. We were talking about the Mississippi River and the barge. The Mississippi River is lower than previously years since 2022. Here's talking about that with Mike Steinhooek from Soy Transportation. How are you today, Mike?
I'm good, Caesar. It's always good to be with you.
The Mississippi River is lower since fall of 2022, I remember correctly. It is same time as well on the river. What is the situation for right now?
Yeah, unfortunately, we're experiencing what I call a three-peat with low water levels on the Mississippi River. We had low water in 2022, and of course last year in 2023, and it was expected that we wouldn't have low water conditions again this year, because during the course of the spring and even into the early summer, we had a considerable amount of precipitation. The drought maps have become much more favorable. Now they've gotten they've incrementally grown in the last number of weeks, but still we're in much better condition than we were last year. Even in late June, we had actually a pretty significant flooding event where water levels were very high, particularly on the Missouri River, but then that made its way to the Mississippi as well. But then all of a sudden, about in the middle of July, the spigots essentially got turned off, and there all of a sudden was a considerably diminished amount of precipitation in the area, and water levels on the Mississippi River responded. So they have retreated considerably since the middle part of July. This is normally the drier part of the year, of course. So it's very customary to see a retreat of water levels during this time of the year. But what concerned us is that, and continues to concern us, is that those water levels are so low that they're having an impact on barge transportation. So at this point in 2024, we're slightly higher than when we were in 2023, but again, last year was a historically low water event, and so it's nothing really to brag about that you're slightly higher now than you were last year. So obviously, it's having an impact on barge transportation. Barge companies are having to load their barges with less freight, less tonnage, and they're having to resort to attaching fewer barges per tow to form a single unit. So that diminishes the economics of barge transportation. So it's very unfortunate, and it's occurring at an inopportune time of the year when we've got harvest increasingly coming online.
How about in the Mississippi River Delta into New Orleans Basin?
Yeah, that's the area where the problem is even more acute. So when you're looking at particularly the Cairo, Illinois, all the way past Memphis, Tennessee, down to the lower Mississippi River near New Orleans, and that's again where 55% of soybean exports usually depart from. So it's a very important area for our industry, particularly for our exports. And that's where we're seeing the real low water conditions on the Mississippi River. It's obviously throughout the whole system, but it's been particularly concerning in that, Cairo, Illinois, south to New Orleans.
Mike, are you talking to U.S. Army Corporation on the Mississippi?
Yeah, that's something that we continually to visit with, along with other inland waterway stakeholders. And obviously the problem is the result of a lack of precipitation. The solution is going to be a return of precipitation and a sustainable amount of precipitation. And that's what we need. So there's a limit to how much you can actually do. But one of the things that we have observed over these last several years is that if the Army Corps of Engineers becomes more proactive in terms of doing things like dredging those parts of the navigation channel that are susceptible to sediment buildup, is an encouragement to profitability. It encourages success. It enables it. And it's not an impediment or an obstacle to success and profitability. And so when you've got a situation where water levels are low on the Mississippi River, that makes it harder for farmers to be profitable. And it's just one more obstacle that they have to overcome. So it is a concern. And, obviously, we hope to see some relief to it. and it's not just the only challenge that we're facing when it comes to our supply chain, but it certainly is a notable one, just given the fact that the Mississippi River is just this very efficient maritime highway that connects some of the main states that produce soybeans and corn and other commodities, and it's able to efficiently move it down to the New Orleans area for export.
Do you have any final thoughts, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, it's just the fact that you've got farmers growing the crop, and by all indications, it's going to be a record crop, or at least close to it. And we still have demand. We've got some challenges in the international marketplace when it comes to demand, but we still have customers overseas that still demand what U.S. farmers are growing. But that third element is the transportation system. That's what connects supply with demand. And again, that transportation system, if it's well maintained, if it's efficient, it can be the source of our competitive advantage in the global marketplace. But when you've got challenges in it, it makes it harder to compete in that marketplace. Our friends in Brazil, they do an exceptional job of producing a lot of soybeans, but they can do it at a lower price. They can produce soybeans, at a lower cost due to lower cost of land, lower cost of labor. But historically, we make up for that cost differential in production by having a more efficient, more economical transportation system. So it has been one of the secrets to our success. It remains that case, but it does become concerning when you've got challenges like low water on the Mississippi River, or some of the other challenges that we're confronting right now when it comes to our supply chain.
Thanks, Mike. This is Mike Steinhooek from Soy Transportation on Back Roads of Illinois.
Well, it's always good to be with you, Caesar. Thanks for having me.
This is your agricultural commodity markets update on the morning session on Back Roads of Illinois. Corn futures are down at 4068 to 9 cents. Soybean futures are down at 10.093 to 4 cents. Wheat futures are down at 5.74 at the half. Let's go over the livestock markets for this morning. Cattle futures are down at 17.4 to 4 to 6 cents. Feeder cattle are down at 2.41 to 4 to 6 cents. Lean hogs are down at 74.03. Crude oil are up to 8 to 9 cents per barrel. Dow Jones are up to 8 points. This has been your morning markets update on Back Roads of Illinois. Sponsored by Kyle Bumstead from Allendale Incorporated. We are here for today with Lori Stevemer from National Pork Producer Council for updating on nppc and demand for pork. We were talking about it with Lori. Welcome back to the show again.
Well, thank you, Caesar. It's nice to be here again.
Let's start with our conversation about updating on the nppc. Could you tell our listeners about it?
Sure. Just to give you an update on nppc, our members have been busy advocating for the Farm Bill and its passage. Last week we were in Washington, D.C. We had our fly-in, and we had about 140 producers there, which was kind of a record crowd for us, along with our Bacon Fest, which is always a really popular event. And our producers were meeting with their representatives on the Hill and really talking about a couple of key issues. The Farm Bill, which we need that passed. The Farm Bill contains funding for both our animal health priorities, but especially Prop 12, which has been a key issue for us. And there's language in there that would help resolve that. I would say the other issue that's been on the radar lately for our producers, especially within the last 6 to 9 months, is just labor and the challenge with finding labor, and especially the TN visa challenges. We've not had the acceptance rate of TN visas that we've had in the past, and those workers are really key on our sow farms.
Do you have some concerns about the Commonwealth of the Farm Bill for right now?
Yeah, that is important to us, and much of agriculture, all of agriculture really is asking for the Farm Bill to be passed. But California's Prop 12, which is California basically dictating how to the rest of the country needs to raise pigs if they want to sell pork in California, is particularly troublesome to our producers, and that concern with the patchwork of regulations, whether it's California's Prop 12, Massachusetts Q3, or whatever the next regulation might come, is really burdensome to our producers. But it's also affecting consumers, and we see that pork prices have increased in California, on average 20%. So these additional regulations are affecting California consumers. And obviously our concern is if more regulations go in across the United States, it could affect pork prices in those states then too.
All right. Are you ready for this harvest season in Blue Earth, Minnesota?
I would say we're
the weather in southern Minnesota and South Dakota for the flooding.
Yeah, I would say we're getting ready for harvest. Probably in another week or so, we'll be going. Here in southern Minnesota, we had a lot of rain and flooding this spring. We had some spots in our fields that were drowned out. So I would say that farmers around here are really anxiously looking to see what yields will be, especially with the corn and soybean meal prices down.
What is the corn yields for your family farm?
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see what they end up being. I would say there's some spots where we'll have good yields, but I know that there are also other spots where we had drowned out areas, or we were, didn't maybe get the nitrogen that we needed at the right time, so the corn was a little yellow. So it'll be interesting to see what those yields are for corn. Right now, I mean, beans look good, but time will tell really for both. And we just need to get out in the field and see what it does.
Do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, I would just like to say that even though it's been, challenging in the pork industry, exports have been our bright spot, and exports in 2024 are up. 2023 was also a good year for us. We exported about 8.2 billion pounds of pork, or excuse me, dollars worth of pork. And so exports have been a bright spot for us. About 26% of our pork is exported. That adds about $64 worth of value to our pigs. So Mexico's our top market. Definitely want to continue to work to expand those markets, whether it's the ones we have or additional new markets. And just would say that, once again, all of us are looking for a farm bill to be done this year yet. And it's really critical, whether we're pig producers or crop producers, that farm bill happens.
Thanks, Lori.
Thank you.
This is Lori Stevemer from National Pork Producer Council on Back Roads of Illinois. We were here with John Heinberg from Total Farm Marketing for today's show on Back Roads of Illinois. We were talking about the commodities markets with John. How are you today?
We are doing well. We are doing well.
Bears for last weekend.
Not planning on it. We'll just let it be what it be.
Did you see the Fed cut from the Board of the Governors? Could you tell our audience what's impact on the agricultural commodity?
Well, let's see. As breaking that down a little bit, there's a lot of moving parts going on there. I mean, obviously, a cut in interest rates in a big hole is a more friendly monetary policy. US dollar usually shows some weakness off of that, usually puts some more money into the system. Those types of things all kind of come into play. In the longer term, it could be more friendly, the commodity space, especially if the US dollar were to continue to soften. Now, a lot of that was already priced in, so we'll have to see how the market reacts. Obviously, big moves in the equity markets to new highs today. Obviously, we saw the weakness in the grains. Not sure they're correlated today. I think more of the issues in the wheat market and the lack of momentum to the upside is what really weighed on corn today. But, it's something we'll have to kind of watch in the longer term if it does kind of come into play and help out some of those commodities. And, it's kind of a inflationary type move to cut interest rates. And again, the commodity space being kind of oversold, maybe a little bit undervalued, could be a reason that we could see some price boost, but still comes down to the fundamentals in the longer term and the supply and demand of the grains that we are currently getting ready to harvest.
What is the percentage points from yesterday?
Well, the Fed took off a half a basis point in terms of that rate cut, which was very highly anticipated by the market. So we didn't see a whole lot of action yesterday. But again, a lot of times at these Fed meetings, it's about what they say versus what they do. And the general commentary from Fed Chair Powell yesterday was very, very friendly, at least in terms of the equity markets. And I think that's some of the reason we're seeing some really good money flow into those equity markets, at least so far here today.
We will see for the acreage report on September 30th. What is your thoughts about it?
Other than harvest pressure, that's probably the next biggest thing on the radar is going to be that report on the 30th. Acre-wise, I don't expect to see a whole lot of changes from what we got off of the June report or in that regard. In terms of acres, we got that adjustment in August, maybe reflecting some of the weather and that we saw obviously during the planting window. So I don't think we're going to see a whole lot more adjustments, at least in terms of acres. The biggest side of that report very well could be the grain stock side of things and how the movement of the bushels have been. Plus also this report is on the 30th is the last chance they can kind of go back and adjust last January's final production numbers. And so we could see some surprises there. Do they raise that corn crop up from last year or make it a little smaller? Same for beans. So those are some things that could be wild cards out there. We did have some very good late season demand, and that was reflected in the USDA report that we got last week, with the increase in the usage for crush as usage for exports on corn, as well as ethanol, to help kind of tweak some of those ending stocks around from the last marketing year. So that's going to be the biggest part of that report in my mind is going to be what happens in the grain stock side. Are there any little surprises that could come at us there? Typically one of the more volatile reports of the year, and then throw in the fact it's the end of the month, end of the quarter, that just adds a little bit more fuel to the fire in terms of volatility.
Can you recap of the June report?
Again, actually, acre numbers in June were not too too far off of what we were thinking. The biggest move obviously came in that August report. in terms of corn acres, and that's where we saw the increase in soybean acres, decrease in some of the corn acres, to kind of get us to where we are now. On the grain stock side of things, grain stock still stayed very, very heavy, in terms of the historical side of it. So it'll be interesting to see what that September numbers will give us. Plus, also that time too, we're going to have some of the early numbers in that grain stocks pile in terms of some of this earlier harvest that's coming in right now.
Do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, it's going to be kind of a busy time, obviously, for producers. Talking to a lot of guys, the combines are rolling. Do have a little bit of rain maybe coming across the corn belt here this weekend. And from what I'm hearing, talking to people, they could use a little bit. Things are actually very dry in some locations. Drought monitor map shows that 26% of the corn acreage now is in some form of drought. If anything, that's allowed this crop to finish very quickly. So guys are rolling out there. A little moisture probably wouldn't hurt, just to get, especially into some of these seeds, just to get the moisture levels up, because they're a little worried about damage in the shelling process from talking to people. So we'll have to see how that goes. Biggest thing is there's still value in this market. We still have a heavy supply market. Export sales numbers for corn were okay today. So we got a little bit of question mark on the demand side there. Bean sales have been good, but kind of cautious where they go in the next few weeks as we kind of maybe peak out some of that demand. So take advantage of the value. If you're going to store grain, I want puts underneath of it. Protect the carry that's in this market, because we could have a heavy supply market with a questionable demand base, and typically, excuse me, and typically that'll put pressure and bleed that carry out. So don't forget about those floors, especially if you're busy now. Now keep an eye on the marketing side while you're getting that harvest done.
Where people can find you for their risk management consulting services.
Sorry about that. Feel free to give me a call, 800-334-9779. Shoot me an email at johnh@totalfarmmarketing.com, and that website of ours, totalfarmmarketing.com. Feel free to reach out. Love to have a conversation with you.
Thanks, John.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time, and go Packers.
This is John Heinberg from Total Farm. This is closed bell numbers of the commodity markets from Kyle Bumstead from Allendale Inc. November feeder cattle plus $3.225, closing at $241.350. December live cattle plus $1.275, closing at $181.125. December lean hogs plus $425, closing at $74.300. December corn -7 single quote 0, closing at $4.05 single quote 6. November soybeans 0 single quote 6, closing at $10.13 single quote 2. December Chicago wheat -10 single quote 2, closing at $565 single quote 4. December KC wheat -14 single quote 0, closing at $564 single quote 4. Closing quotes provided by Kyle R. Bumstead, Branch Office Manager, Erickson, Nebraska, Allendale, Incorporated. Thanks to Mike Steinhooek from Soy Transportation and Lori Stevemer from National Pork Producer Council, John Heinberg from Total Farm Marketing. We're running out of time on our show, but you can listen to our show on YouTube and whenever you get your podcast. This has been Back Roads of Illinois. I'm Cesar Delgado. Have a good day.